There's a bit of a chicken or the egg thing going on with little crossovers like the Honda HR-V. Did automakers start building them in response to consumer demand, or did consumers like you start buying them because they were popping up everywhere? Either way, there's no denying that they pack all kinds of practicality inside their tiny footprints, and that's always been the case for the HR-V. But so much has changed about this segment since this thing first came to Canada that this new version was long overdue. Now, the bad news, still no hybrid here, and the reconfigurable rear seats, those are gone. But underneath that restyled sheet metal is the nicest interior in the segment. Plus, this thing finally has at least a little pep in its step. But be prepared to pay big bucks if you want to park one in your driveway. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. Look, I think there is a big problem with North American shoppers and buying the vehicle that you can afford or the one you want instead of the one you need. And I know that might seem a little accusatory, but just hear me out. I'm talking about buying something that fits your lifestyle and isn't more than you need. You're not going with the excess. And that to me is the appeal of a subcompact crossover like this. Even if you have a couple kids, there's more than enough space in one of these things. So if you are willing to buy as much as you need and is not as much as you want or as much as you can afford, then this has a lot of appeal. But affordability really does become a problem because these are supposed to be cheap. But if you take a look at the cheapest version of the HR-V, it starts at about $31,000 before tax. And that's for a front wheel drive version. If you want all wheel drive, you're gonna have to add another $2,300. And if you take a look, that's about $4,000 more than the cheapest Toyota Corolla Cross and about $5,000 more than the cheapest Kia Seltos. And that is probably the leader in this segment in terms of bang for your buck. I've already reviewed it. We did a comparison with the Corolla Cross. You can go ahead and watch those to find out why it's so great. But that really does become a problem. Now, when you take a look at the sport trim of this HR-V, well, it's about $36,000. And that's about the same as the most expensive versions of the Corolla Cross and the Seltos. It does have standard all-wheel drive as well as a few other great features. But I really get hung up on that because if you want this one I'm driving, the top EXL Navi or whatever it's called, some funky name, it is $41,000 before tax. And that gets into that whole debate about buying as much as you can afford because you can get a pretty well-equipped CR-V for that money, which has way more space than this thing does. Now, if you're still interested in what this new HR-V has to offer, well, there's a lot to like starting with this interior, and it's sort of borrowed from the design direction that was introduced with the latest Civic, which looks great. Already have a review of that up on the channel. You can go ahead and watch that when you are done here. But if you dig that interior, well, you're probably going to dig this one too because it's got that same awesome honeycomb mesh that spans the entire grille and it integrates the HVAC vents with just a little bit of design. Very nice. I really do like it. And I also like how simple it is in here. Now, this infotainment system, vastly improved. One of the biggest improvement points. It's very smartphone-like in its execution. It's got these tile icons. And if you go with this top trim, it comes with a 9-inch screen and it has this configurable shortcut bar along the bottom so you can drag and drop your favorites so that you can have your favorite features there. I really do like that. And this bigger screen does come with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, whereas the 7-inch screen that's in the base and sport trims, well, both of those connections are wired. And as the Navi name would suggest, this does have built-in navigation, but let's be honest, with Google Maps or Apple Maps, if you're some sort of masochist, well, those are way better than any OEM system. That's very much the case here. It's not terrible, but Google Maps is just better. So I don't understand why you would even use this system when you have something as great as Google Maps right at your fingertips. I also have to say, screen response, very good. And I like the simplicity. Like I said, these HVAC controls, very easy to understand. Buttons and dials, little LCD displays so you can see what's going on. The same goes with the steering wheel. All of this stuff is very self-explanatory. You don't have to bust open the owner's manual to figure out what any of this stuff does. You've got these controls on the left, and that's for the display here as well as phone audio. There's a little clicky kind of toggle that does the volume, buttons to skip. There's also this little scroll wheel. And then on this side, this is all your adaptive cruise control stuff. That is standard across the lineup, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Point being, everything in here is very easy to understand. And it's interesting because I would call this kind of classically Honda, but more so in what we think should be classically Honda and not what we've had to deal with for the last number of years, where the volume knob went away and then we all complained about that. So this has that again, but it's just very simple. Back to the basics, but also very sophisticated looking, very upscale. I do think this is probably the nicest looking interior in the segment. This could compete with some high priced vehicles from premium automakers. I'm telling you right now, looks great. Few features are missing for the money, but again, we'll get into that stuff a little later on. Now, it doesn't take too keen of an eye to notice that this thing looks vastly different than the last HR-V. It's also quite a bit bigger. Now, other parts of the world still have one that's a little closer in size to the previous generation, whereas this is actually much bigger, built on the Civic platform. It's about 7 inches overall longer than the last HR-V, and you can tell as soon as you get in, there's more legroom in the back. Space has always been something the HR-V has done well, but this just takes it to a new level, especially when it comes to headroom. That was something I struggled with in the last version, but up here, as you can see, even with this sunroof, I've got plenty of space. I really do like that. I also just like how kind of low and car-like the ride is. It makes getting in and out very easy. A small crossover that's big on space. That's been the HR-V's mantra since it landed here back in 2015, and it's still the case with this one. Now, it's like I said earlier, no more magic seats in the back. A little bit disappointing because there's no way to lift up that lower cushion so you can stand taller items upright on the floor, but this thing is bigger than the last one, and that translates directly into more second row room. I can do the whole sit behind myself test, and it passes with flying colors. And it's like I always remind you guys, I'm about 6'3", so that is a true testament to the roominess of this second row. I also love how wide these doors open, because it means if you've got kids, it should be easier to help them in and out of their car seats. And then in terms of cargo room, well, there's about 700 liters behind the back seats and almost 1,600 with them folded. So not quite as much as the Seltos, but not enough to put this thing at a disadvantage. Overall, completely restyled, as I'm sure you can tell. This looks nothing like the last version of the HR-V, though I'm not sure that is a good thing. Now, interior-wise, it absolutely is. This is the nicest cabin in this segment. I think I can say that with confidence, though I did notice a few issues. One of them, no scuff plates. And I noticed some scratches on the rockers just inside the doors. This thing's only got a couple thousand kilometers on the odometer, so that is a little bit concerning, and so is the build quality. I'm not sure if it's just this one or if it's an HR-V wide thing, but I noticed the dash panel where the touchscreen is mounted is very loose, and if you kind of poke and prod and hit those buttons hard enough, you'll see the whole thing shift. And the same goes with that center console. Love the shape. It's got this kind of dog bone shape to it, a little shelf underneath, but it moves back and forth quite a bit. So make sure to look into that in the one you are considering before you sign any paperwork. And then overall, I do think this styling is inoffensive, with one exception. This front end, that grille, I don't know, it's got this kind of blowfish look to it. Not so crazy about it, but overall, I do think it's a fairly stylish subcompact crossover. My biggest beef with the last HR-V was just how sleepy the powertrain was, but this one vastly improved. Now, it's a 2-liter 4-cylinder, still no turbo. It's naturally aspirated just like before. Output 158 horsepower and 138 pound-feet of torque. So not standout numbers. I think that's like 17 more horsepower and 11 pound-feet torque more than last time? Not much, but the big difference is the way the transmission has been tuned, and it's still a continuously variable automatic. And yes, when you get your foot into it, it does not sound very good. Sounds like it could wind out forever, but it is way more responsive. There's just kind of a liveliness. There's a little bit of pep in the step that this thing was missing. Feels a lot more competitive now when you get your foot down. It also does have a couple different drive modes. I have it in eco mode to maximize efficiency, but even then, I can actually pass and merge without issue. One thing I noticed though, no more paddle shifters. And I think the top trim of the last one, you could get paddle shifters. That would help because you could downshift if you were passing someone on the highway. This doesn't have it, but even coming up a hill right there, this thing, for the first time, maybe ever, actually feels sort of punchy. And just overall, the drive is very nice. And I didn't hate the way the last one drove, but the steering here is way nicer than before. Not a whole lot of body roll to contend with. Just a nice driving little crossover. Not as tall and upright as the Corolla Cross or the Seltos. I think that helps. This is a lot more like the Hyundai Kona. Feels a lot more like a hatchback, but you still have all kinds of room inside. But going back to what I said earlier, there is no hybrid powertrain in North America. For some reason, Honda keeps withholding that from us. And that means fuel efficiency, well, it could be better. This is officially rated for 8.7 liters per 100 kilometers, which is about the same as the turbocharged Kia Seltos. That engine comes in the top trim. That, like I said earlier, is about the same price as the mid trim of the HR-V. The fact that this thing is rated for 8.7 liters per 100, not so great, especially when you take a look at vehicles like the Toyota Corolla Cross that are better. And there's a hybrid of that thing on its way. So that really is going to put this to shame at the fuel pumps. But the good news is I've been doing a little bit better this week. Earlier when I picked it up, went on my evaluation drive that I always talk to you guys about, and I averaged 7.5 liters per 100 kilometers. And don't forget, this thing is all-wheel drive. And the other cool thing is, well, it's not totally a full-time system like you get in the Subaru Crosstrek, but it's pretty close. And there's this little screen here that you can monitor your torque distribution. And basically all the time, it's sending torque to all four wheels. Now, of course, it does prioritize the front in the name of efficiency, but you really don't notice it. At least when you're looking at this screen, there's no discernible difference or time when it's just running the front wheels according to the computer. So that is decent efficiency, all things considered. Now, aside from the newfound confidence when you're passing and merging and just overall the nice driving dynamics, well, generally it is well packaged. Pricing aside, you get all the features that you would expect. So heated front seats are standard, touchscreen infotainment, those phone connections I talked about. There's also a whole host of advanced safety features. And that is something that this has in its favor because not many competitors include absolutely everything across the board. This does. So you got blind spot monitoring, forward collision warning with pedestrian detection and automatic emergency braking. Blind spot monitoring is the big one. That's usually not available lower down in the lineups, but this does have that, as well as lane keep assist and adaptive cruise control. And I do have to say, all of those systems vastly improved. Always had a problem with Honda's systems where they felt very sensitive. You'd be in normal traffic, kind of stop and go gridlock stuff, and it would be beeping and flashing, telling you to brake when you actually weren't approaching anyone in front of you. You were maintaining a normal distance. This, a lot better than before. I do like that. But when we talk about features, something that I have an issue with, well, one good side of this is that it finally has a heated steering wheel. It's not in the base trim, but it comes in the Sport as well as this EXL Navi. But no ventilated front seats, no heated rear seats. That's stuff that you can get in competitor products. Same thing goes with no head-up display and no surround view monitoring. Now, the backup camera views, way crisper, way nicer than before, but there's no surround view monitoring here that you can get in some competitor products. Those are problems for me because A, this thing is one of, if not the newest subcompact crossover on the market. And also, well, the whole segment has been elevated, and it seems like Honda had an opportunity to really put this head and shoulders above the rest of the pack. And it did in some areas, like this fantastic interior, and even the drivability is up near the top of the segment. But it's missing a few features that would really help for it to stand out, especially considering the price. To recap, I like the new interior in the Honda HR-V, the improved powertrain, and the standard safety suite that comes with it. I don't like that it's so expensive that we still don't get the hybrid version here, or that it's missing a few standout features. For all there is to like about this new HR-V, it's hard to ignore what it's missing for the money, especially at the top of the lineup. Forget the flip-up rear seats or even the hybrid powertrain that's available in other parts of the world. Even simple comforts like ventilated front seats or heated rear ones, a head-up display, even a surround view camera system. All that stuff is becoming increasingly common in this segment, which makes it very difficult to justify the high price tag here. Maybe we've just been spoiled by the likes of the Kia Seltos or that new Volkswagen Taos, but it does feel like this thing comes up a little short. But then again, if you don't mind spending a few extra grand to get behind the wheel, this thing offers plenty to like.